I'll just, I,
All right. Well, everybody, welcome. We're going to give it another minute or so to see if more people are able to join, and then we'll get started in about a minute or two.
Okay.
So if you are
Unmute
here
mic
and
too.
you're waiting, please go ahead and make sure you've joined the class of 2027 Google Classroom. Parents, that is where your student will find a lot of information over the next year, a lot of information about college graduation, all of that. So go ahead and use the QR code there, the join link if you need to, parents, and you can go ahead and join. All right. If you're just joining, like I said, we're just going to give it a little bit and let people get on here. All right, let's go ahead and get started. And as people join, all this presentation is being recorded, so all of this information will be there at the end, so you will be able to come back and view this later. But yeah, to start out, my name is Megan Holden. I'm the College and Career Readiness Counselor at Bay High School. We really appreciate you being here tonight and participating. We know it's a busy season for everything, and we wanted to make sure you had all of this information heading into it. So Thanksgiving, the holidays are really nice times to start having conversations with your students. So we want you to be prepared with everything you need to do that. Mrs. Walukas is joining us tonight. She's a school counselor at Bay High School for students with the last names H through O. We have Mrs. Fanter. She is a teacher at Bay High School, an English teacher, and she teaches our college prep elective along with our AP English language and composition class. So she does a lot of work on SAT and ACT test prep, along with essays and just general college preparation. And then we also have Mr. Bill Novak. He is our lead financial aid advisor. So if you have questions about financial aid, about affording college, he is going to be your go-to person. And he's going to share just a brief couple slides at the end with information that you should know as a junior or underclassmen parent. So just to start out, this is an exciting time. It's also a stressful time. So we want to remind you guys to try to keep your student in the driver's seat to the extent that you can. And by encouraging independence, helping to manage your students' stress, you can really help them along the way. We know this is a very stressful time for students, especially the fall of senior year. So the more information and the more research that you guys have coming into it, the more you can pace yourselves and kind of find your way. That can include you being here tonight, attending information sessions, respecting their decisions, especially at this point in the game. They might bring up some colleges that you think they have no way, no how of attending, but kind of hearing them out, what they like about that, what they don't, respecting their decisions and celebrating their achievements along the way can really help make it an easier time for parents. So as you prepare as a parent for this entire process, the fact that you are on this webinar right now is great. You're starting early. That's a great thing. Listen to your child and try to not only hear what they like about things, what they want to do, but also what are their interests you're hearing common themes of? What are their strengths? What are their goals, whether it's for a career or their lifestyle or colleges, the type of experience they want to have? That's important for you to potentially pay attention to. Helping with the research process can really help students understand their options. Financial planning is a conversation that we realize a lot of families don't necessarily want to have with their students, but it can be very helpful in terms of preventing heartbreak down the road, and just kind of helping your student come up with some reasonable and helpful options. And then campus visits. This is one of the reasons we're holding this seminar now. We know that a lot of people do that while they're on their holiday breaks and they're traveling, and this is a great time to be starting campus visits and getting a feel for everything. All right, so at Bay High School, we have students that explore a lot of different pathways. People might think of it as being, oh, everybody goes to college, but we always have students that also attend community college, trade schools, and apprenticeships. Trade schools and apprenticeships have gotten a lot more popular in the past couple of years as the appeal of being paid while working has a big appeal to a lot of students. So we do have information on that. And actually, Bill is a really great resource for that. He has worked in that area in his previous job. So he has also helped guide some of our students for questions that the counselors, we may not have as much information on. He is a great resource. So last year, this is our class of 2025. We did have about 90% of our students attend a 4-year from Bay. We had 5% of our students went directly into gainful employment. So those were students who maybe had participated in our West Shore program and went directly into an engineer or a electrician job, for example. We have a good chunk of kids who go to 2-year college, and that is a great option. We have a lot of students who are recently interested in things like sonography and a lot of medically aligned professions, and 2-year college is a great way to do that. Also for nursing, a lot of people underestimate the value of a 2-year college because with an associate's degree, you can start that nursing career. And a lot of times the hospital will pay for you to finish your bachelor's. Apprenticeships, as we've talked about, is a great way for students to get paid while they are working. A lot of times your apprenticeship will pay for your education also. So you're getting your education paid for, getting a salary. It's really a win-win. And then we do have students who are undecided or go to a traditional trade school. So last year, in terms of our students, these were the most popular majors that we saw students go into. Business was number 1, engineering, computer science, biological and biomedical sciences, health, computer science. And then we always have a pretty high chunk of kids who go in undecided. And we'll talk about that more later, but that is totally okay also. So nationwide, our majors that are popular with our students align pretty well with the most popular majors you can see at the bottom there. I will say that Bay tends to have more engineering. That's 10% of the class last year went into an engineering major, and that exceeds the national standards. So I thought that was pretty cool. In terms of the majors that our Bay students go into, there are some disparities between, we see more females going to health sciences, more males going to engineering. I just thought this was interesting and kind of something that was reflected year to year. I think that that's something that can be a starting point of conversation with your students and just kind of exploring what their interests are. So last year, our students really went all over the country. As you can see, 92% of seniors submitted at least one college application, 90% attended. So you can see that that number is pretty close. So in total last year, there were 906 total applications submitted by students. So you can see that our students are applying far and wide, and there's a vast array. So there were 184 different colleges and universities that students applied to, and they are actually attending 45 different universities and colleges. So there's a lot of overlap. When we say colleges and universities, this is just a fun fact, but historically colleges are programs that do not have a graduate program, so they tend to be smaller. Universities are schools that do have a graduate program, like a master's degree and a doctoral degree. Some are grandfathered in, like Boston College, for example, has a master's program, but it was established as a undergrad only, but that can kind of be a rule of thumb when we use those phrases, colleges and universities, that in terms of the size. So this is actually reflecting our current seniors, our class of 2026. A lot of parents, when they are talking to us, they ask about what are common schools that our high school students apply to. So these are in order the top 15 schools that our students have applied to so far this year. So you can see Ohio State, OU, Miami, Cincinnati. Those are always in our top 4. So continuing on, Kentucky is very popular, Penn State, Indiana, West Virginia. So you can see that in general, and this is a nationwide trend also, since COVID, students have tended to apply to colleges closer to home, and our data tends to track with that. All of these schools are within about 4 or 5 hours, a drive away from home. So, yeah. All right, I am going to hand it over to Mrs. Malukas to talk a little bit more about exploring options for your student.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar tonight. Like I said, I'm Mrs. Malukas. I've been at Bay for 20 years and I work with students H2O, but always willing to work with anybody and looking forward to working with your students, the juniors, for their upcoming senior year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about self-exploration, considering career pathways and college majors. So go to the next slide. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is Naviance. So Naviance is a college and career life readiness tool that we have used probably, I would say, at least 15 plus years. So during freshman year, we do register all students onto Naviance. And it is a program where they can go in. The first thing that we ask them to do is take these different career assessment tests, which will be on the next slide. And so what we do after they take the career assessment test, I at least tell my students, please let me know when you're done. And then we come back and we kind of go over their results together. Sometimes they're very different a freshman year than what they would be their junior year because some of their interests have changed, skills, abilities, personality, all that stuff. So I also encourage kids to take them again their junior year. So like over Christmas break, Thanksgiving break, I would encourage your child to log in and maybe take, so the career interest profiler, the career cluster finder and the personality test are all great ones to kind of retake just to see if they are similar results to when they took it freshman year. Why I like doing this is like, I don't think that kids need to know exactly what they want to do for the rest of their life, because obviously that stuff changes, but it is good to start thinking and having an idea about things that you like. Like you could sit down and say, these are the things I know I don't want to do. And then these are things that really sound interesting to me. So like putting together or maybe researching 5 different careers or trades or apprenticeships that really kind of intrigue them, and like starting with that list, I think is really important. And then the Strengths Explorer is awesome because it kind of like really defines where the student's strengths are, and it kind of matches them up with careers and majors based on that as well. So majors and career. So when should your child choose your major? So that's the biggest question, like even with sophomores right now. So we're doing our sophomore conference and I ask every student, like, have you ever thought about what you want to do when you graduate high school? And I do surprisingly have a ton of kids that know exactly, or what they think they know exactly what they want to do, or at least have a general idea, which is awesome. And then I have a lot of students that have absolutely no idea what they want to do. So I think if anything, Naviance can be a starting point for kids to start figuring this out and sitting and talking to your parents. And Mrs. Holden is going to talk about this later, but then also getting out and getting some real world experience. So why it's sometimes critical is because some institutions do require you to apply specifically to their direct admit programs like nursing, business, engineering. So what happens is if you know for sure you want to go into nursing and you apply direct admit and maybe you don't get into that school that you really want to go to, maybe you consider a different school, or like, you know, if you decide your sophomore year you want to go into nursing, that college that only has a direct admit program might not be the best choice for you. So some of it is important to kind of know, but at least 30% of students do change their major at least once and 10% change it more than once. So but also again, changing your major can lead to more costs, like tacking on another year of college. But going into college with some CCP or AP credit can also buy you more time to explore. So a lot of our liberal arts school, we have 57 private liberal institutions in Ohio. They can be a little bit more flexible with exploratory type classes and whatnot. But yeah, so I think it's just kind of honing in on your skills, abilities, and interests, and where can those skills apply to certain careers. So back to Mrs. Holden.
Yeah, I'll pop in for a second and just talk briefly about our experience-ship program. You may have heard of it or heard your students talking about it, but in line with what Carrie was saying, we want our students to get that experience so that they know what they're going into. Colleges say all the time that it's helpful for them in the admissions process to show them that students understand what this major is going to consist of. So if they have 2 applicants applying for nursing and one has no experience actually in the nursing field, and one is applying and has experienced job shadows and then summer volunteer program, and they have experienced it, they know what they're getting into. This colleges have told us they're more likely to admit that student. So the experience-ship program has its whole own Google Classroom that you can access, but that is basically our attempt to set children up with mentoring, internships, job shadow opportunities, all of that kind of stuff. And we do try to incentivize students to participate by earning an experience-ship pin, which I actually have one of our little pins right here. So they get these that they can earn for graduation that they wear on their stole, and it's a little bit of extra bling for them. In terms of exploring more hands-on opportunities, West Shore, our career technical district, they also offer a trades and career fair. They offer job shadowing opportunities also, and that'll be on March 26th, 2026. And then we've also integrated field experiences into all of our independent study classes and different BHS classes and CCP classes so that students can have opportunities to go out and experience that real world that we are always encouraging them to get into. All right, I am going to hand it back over to Mrs. Lucas to talk a little bit in more depth about college application terminology that you will be hearing us use all night.
All right, the Common App. I actually love the Common App. I think it's wonderful. Mrs. Holden and I spend a lot of time in the fall sitting down with kids one-on-one and looking over their Common App before they submit it. So we're very familiar with it. I know it seems kind of like scary, but I can assure you that your child is in good hands and we will help them with every step of the way through this process because it's exciting. And it feels very overwhelming, but I can assure you that once you start and once you finish, you'll be like, wow, that really wasn't that bad. So on the Common App, basically what it is one application where you can apply to all the schools that you want to apply to. So it's really nice. So the beginning of the Common App, you're kind of just filling out all your basic information, and then it kind of goes through, and then you're going to put in all your activities, and then you're going to write an essay. So it's like one common essay that's going to go to all the different colleges, and then you're going to start adding your colleges in. And once you do that, and you'll see it once you get started, but on the left hand side, then each college is going to ask different questions for the students to fill out, and those colleges may require more additional essays through the process. So the Common App is typically what our students use. I would say 90 to 95% of our kids use the Common App that are applying to college. The other option is, like, let's say your dream is to go to Kent State or Bowling Green, and those are the only 2 schools you're going to apply to. I'm just using those 2 as an example because their online applications directly through their university are very simple. So you may not want to fill out an entire Common application if you're just applying to those 2 schools. But like I said, most of our kids are applying to a lot more than just 2 schools. So you can apply directly in the individual websites if that college, accepts that, but most of the schools take the Common App, and then we do not encourage kids. They typically, nobody does the coalition. But yeah, so for the Common App, it's just like a one-stop shop, like everything's there and it's really easy for the kids to use. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the terminology: early decision, early action, restrictive early action, and regular decision. So when you're applying to colleges, so when you come in the fall, for the juniors when you're a senior and you're going to come in the fall, and I'll go through the timeline later, but you're going to start, after August 1st, working on your Common App. It is very, very important to be looking at these colleges and knowing what their deadlines are. I would say most colleges, just in general, and I'll go through some on the next slide, have a deadline of November 1st. So I always tell kids in your senior conference, and the parents are invited to that you should try to aim to have everything done by like late September, early October, because then you have some time to kind of work through things. Like, you don't want to tell us on October 29th that you have a November 1st deadline, because the counselors have to go in. We have to make sure your letters of recommendations are in there. We have to make sure our letter of recommendation is in there for you. And then we have a bunch of forms that we need to fill out to send to the colleges. So knowing what the deadlines are, knowing that process, keeping yourself organized ahead of time is going to be very important. We always encourage our students to apply early action. So when you apply early action to a college, you're applying early, but you're also getting an earlier decision. And an early action is non-binding. Okay, I want to make that very clear. So just because you're applying early action, like with early decision, that one is binding. Okay, so when our kids apply early decision, we have to sign off on them doing that. And if a student applies early decision, that college, right, you're telling that college that if you get accepted, that you do want to go there. So you do have a higher chance of getting into college when you apply early decision, but you might not always get a ton of money, because they kind of know that they have you because you have agreed to attend that college if you were admitted. So early action is kind of a great choice. And you will get an early decision, and then you're also going to be in line for scholarship money for that as well. You could always apply regular decision, which is also a fine thing to do, but most colleges, though, at that point have used up all their scholarship money or money that they've given out to kids. So not a lot of people are in contention for money if they apply regular decision, which is usually January, February. Okay, just to give you guys some examples, there are some October 15th deadlines, and a lot of these schools our kids do apply to. The big ones I would say are Clemson, South Carolina, Chapel Hill, but we always have some kids apply to Georgia as well. But November 1st is going to be most of your colleges, like your Ohio State, Cincinnati, Miami, Michigan, Case. And then November 15th is like, your OUs and things like that. And then Kentucky is later. But I always tell kids, like, if you can get your common application done by beginning of October, mid-October at the latest, and you're going to submit it, you might as well just submit it to all the colleges and get everything done. Like, sometimes it's easier just to send everything in. And then early January are going to be some of your maybe more competitive schools like Vanderbilt, NYU. And then mid-January, there are some schools that kind of extend their deadline to mid-January. There are schools that don't offer an early action, only regular decision or early decision. But I would say for the most part, most colleges will offer an early action deadline. All right. Mrs. Fanter is going to talk next about college admission testing.
Hello, I'm Heather Fanter. Sorry, I lost my voice. Probably yelling at my students, which are likely your children, so I apologize. First thing for you to know is that most of your students probably know this. If not, they haven't been listening, but they have the opportunity when they take multiple SATs or ACTs to submit their highest subsection scores. So if they take the test in December and they do great on math, but not as great on the English section, and they take it again in the spring and do better on the English section, but not so much on the math, they can submit the highest sectional scores to the schools. So that is a wonderful opportunity for your child. Next slide. I bet a lot of you are familiar with the SAT and the ACT, but they're very different than when we were taking them, at least for me, because that was a long time ago. The SAT is not on paper at all. It's a digital only test now. There is an 800-point maximum for the reading and writing and an 800-point maximum for the math section, which is the same as it was before. But it's a much shorter test. The test responds to student answers so that they can get more information from the student in a faster way. So it's only 2 hours and 14 minutes. We will give them a free school day SAT at Bay High School. This year it's on March 11th. So that's a great time for them to take their first SAT. They already took the PSAT in October. And if you didn't know that their scores were released, they were. So you could log in and see how they did on it. And they can log into and see what areas they felt good about or which areas they'd like to work on before March 11th. The ACT, we do not offer at Bay High School anymore. We can only pick one. So they have to register for that on their own. And we recommend the December date or the February date during their junior year of high school. I always tell my students that if they're taking a math this semester, then I think December is a good time. But if they're not taking a math until winter semester and they've been off since last spring from math, I think it's probably a good opportunity to just wait until February so they can kind of refresh on all those math skills. Um, I think students should take both tests for sure, just because they're very different. The ACT has 4 separate sections: math, English, reading, and there's an optional science. They don't have to take that, but we recommend that most students, I think, at Bay do very well on that section, and it can boost their overall composite score. So, and then the SAT is reading, writing, math, reading, writing, math, and it's just a very different score style. So I think they should at least take both tests once. A lot of times the first score is not what the student was aiming for. So I tell my students, and I know Mrs. Holden and Mrs. Will Lucas say 2 or 3 times is probably a good number. I know that Mrs. Holden said that there is some science and research that shows after 3 times, most people don't move their score up a whole lot. Plus, you have to pay every time. And if you're not sure and wait to the last minute, you have to pay the late fee to register. So it can be expensive. Um, it also depends a lot if it's worth it to take multiple times, how much your students working on their test prep in between. So I know when I was in high school, I took it the first time and I was pretty happy, but I thought I could do better. But I didn't do anything at all and took it again, and I got 1 point lower. So I always tell my students that's a bad strategy. Don't do that. Um, so this is their junior year. Sometime in the near future, they could still sign up right now for the December one with a late fee, or they could take the February one. And there's ACT.org is where they register for that test, and the College Board is where the SAT is through. But again, they're going to take that for sure on March 11th. So you could probably just table that until you get those scores back. Things have changed a lot in colleges. When I started teaching college prep, every school took test scores pretty much. And then since 2020, that changed a lot. And it's still kind of like a hybrid right now. So a lot of schools are test optional. So if students want to submit their test scores, they can. Typically, admissions reps will say if their score is higher than like the average, the 50th percentile of admitted freshmen, then they might be a good option to submit their scores. And if they're lower, but they have a good GPA, they have other good characteristics, then they should just not submit the test scores. And there's a list of schools there. Ohio State is no longer test optional, but all the other schools in Ohio are. And some pretty competitive schools. As you can see, Case Western still test optional. A lot of schools also have this new kind of test blind, no harm policy, meaning you can submit your scores and they might help your application, but they won't hurt your application. So I was just at John Carroll University with my college prep students, and they were explaining that that's their process there, and they only take it into consideration if it's a value. Otherwise, they just set it to the side. So that's certainly an option for a lot of students. And then some schools have gone back to requiring their test scores. The one that's most relevant to our students is Ohio State, because that's where a lot of our students apply. But University of Florida, Purdue, MIT, I know Dartmouth, some of the other schools listed here, Georgia, those will require test scores. So it really just depends on which schools your child is interested in. And there are many ways for your students to prepare for the test. I know a lot of parents feel pressure to hire a tutor, which is fine. And we have wonderful tutors that we can recommend or that are available in the community. But there's also a lot of free resources that they can utilize. Khan Academy, we used to use that in school in college prep, but it's no longer one that we can use through school because of some privacy issues, but the students can use it on their own. They can log in, create an account, practice there. ACT.org, which is where you would register to take the test. They have practice questions, practice tests there too. I like that website because there's a question of the day. And it's kind of a fun thing to do, just like every day. It might be math, it might be reading, it might be a passage, it might be a chart they have to analyze. But if you wanted to pester your child and say, why don't you do that word of the day? You know, it's like question of the day. It's kind of just like doing the Wordle or something, but it gives them some familiarity with the type of questions that will show up on the exam. Schoolhouse is a new one that I just learned about, but apparently some students are having success with it and even working as peer tutors. And then we do have a list of tutors on the Bay counseling page where you can find local and recommended tutors. I would also say that it's kind of old fashioned, but a lot of students really like to use the test book because there's practice questions. They don't have to do the full online test where they're locked into a time frame. They can decide if they want to do 10 questions and then go look at the answers. And we have brand new ones in the library at the high school from 2025. I use them in my class, but we never get through all of the practice tests that are there. So there's plenty of questions that they haven't encountered yet. And there's an explanation for every question for why they got it wrong. So that's a great opportunity for them to take a test, see what they got wrong. And if they don't understand the explanation, they can take that paper easily to an English teacher or a math teacher and say, can you explain why I got this wrong? And those are resources that are free and they're available right in the building.
All right, next, we're going to talk about exploring colleges and starting that process. So to start out, how to help your students figure out what they are looking for in a college. So when we're talking about finding, assessing colleges, kind of ranking them, as you start to visit campuses, as you start to go on websites, there are kind of 4 categories of things I encourage you to look for in terms of your student. The first one being, is this school going to be an academic fit? Do they offer the desired major? Even if your student's undecided, looking at a list of majors and seeing if there are any that stand out is really helpful. Unfortunately, I've had some conversations with students who, you know, in May have told me like, I'm going to this school and I'm going to study this. And I'm like, well, they don't have that major. And the student's like, what? Doing some of this research is really important. Class sizes, instead of looking at just the general university list of class sizes, looking at the class sizes for that particular major can be really helpful if that's something that is going to be important to your student. Student and faculty ratios. So when you're looking at sizes and ratios, the question that you are really asking yourself is my student someone who's going to be able to advocate for themselves if they don't understand something? If the answer is yes, they will probably do fine with a larger class size or a larger student to faculty ratio. If the answer is no, then I would consider looking at schools with smaller class sizes. Some schools have more of a liberal arts curriculum where you take a little bit of classes from a lot of different areas for a well-rounded base, versus some schools have what's called an open curriculum where the student designs their own course of study. Versus some schools that are going to be more of like your Institute of Technology, that is more of a pre-professional curriculum. And does one of those sound like a better fit for your child? Some schools will have their classes be mostly seminars versus labs or lectures. And then are there other travel abroad or specific programs? So I know there's a student we had who is going to the University of somewhere in Maine, and they had a specific program that you got to study on an island of some environmental cross with, it was a perfect fit for what she wanted to do. And does the school offer any of those programs that are that perfect fit for your student? The cultural fit is kind of more of what's the vibe, as our students would say. How does it feel? Do they like the population size of the school? Are they able to get into the classes they want? Sometimes with a really large school, students don't think about that they get closed out of classes easily. Are they wanting to drive to campus, or are you able to fly them to campus, things like that? What sort of weekend activities are students up to on campus? And we hear a lot of kids who I feel like Bay has a really big sports culture, school spirit. A lot of kids want to continue that, and they're looking at kind of our Big Ten schools, our SEC schools, and is that going to be a fit for your student? And kind of just the political, religious diversity, that whole vibe to campus. Is it a fit for what your student is looking for and for their personality and values? So financially, as we talked about, Bill is going to get into this a little more later, but just affordability, using a net price calculator. That's a tool that every college has on their website, and that will have you input information and tell you how much you would likely be expected to pay at that school. That's something that some schools allow you to use for negotiations, that you were expected to pay this much versus how much they actually gave you. Thinking about just, is this going to be feasible for our family? And like we've said, having that conversation earlier than later can be really helpful, because it is always tough when it comes to be May and the parent has to, break the student's heart and say, look, we just can't do this. And then a career fit. So when students were told, this was a national poll, I forget where, it was through the National Association for College Admission Counseling. Students overall said that the most important thing to them in the college search was the feel of campus. Parents, their number one was the career. Are you going to come out of this with a job? So looking at that on campus, how strong is the alumni network? Do they have a career center? How many places are coming into the school for recruiting and job fairs? Do they offer internships and co-ops? That's a big push by colleges right now. So you should be able to find a lot of information about that. All of these are great things to ask when you go on a tour or look for on the website to kind of help you put together this information. I created a spreadsheet that you can use. It'll post at the end of this webinar in the Google Classroom. But I added some information just as a starting point for like our 15 to 20 most popular schools among Bay students. But I think there's 30 data columns in this, which in the grand scheme of college feels like a good amount of information. At a bare minimum you should have before making that financial commitment. So I know when you first look at it, you might say, that's a lot to have to look up. But some of these, if you don't know the answer to, that can be not so hot. So it can be interesting too to look at what are the most popular majors on campus. Do you want something where there's going to be a lot of other engineering students, or do you want somewhere that you're going to, stand out? If you're a student who is telling me, I really want to do research in college, I want to work in a lab, I think that sounds so cool, then you might not want to go to a school that has unclassified or low research activity. That one in this case is John Carroll on this list. And then same with, I've included some information in here about average annual cost. This is the average family in Bay, according to niche.com, makes $122,000 of family income. So this is based on that for what the average Bay family would pay at each school versus the debt that students are graduating with. And even in terms of how many students take out loans. If you are a student who is part of the 24% who takes out loan, are you going to be comfortable socioeconomic wise with your peers? There's just a lot of factors that you can look into in your search process. So feel free to make a copy of this chart and kind of plug in with some of your schools. Our ideal is that, you know, you're starting with a broad list, right? And then sophomore year, you're just exploring. In junior year, exploring. Our ideal is that by the end of junior year, maybe you're narrowing that down to your top 10 schools of interest, you know, or at least getting a feel for what factors are most important to you. So by the time students come to us for senior year, when they start out those senior conferences that Carrie was talking about, it's helpful if they have a list of schools. And we are always here throughout the, you know, starting now, anytime, to help you kind of explore that. But we're hoping that students kind of have, you know, 4 match schools. They're right in the range academic wise, a couple of reach schools, a couple safety schools. The biggest things I see at Bay are students who over apply to safety schools. If a school, you know, you don't need to apply to 10 schools that have a 95% acceptance rate, unless you want to pay the application fees. And then the same with wildcard schools. We do have some students who apply to, you know, a multitude of wildcards and not enough matches and safeties. So having a balanced list is what we as counselors are looking for when we're listening to the schools you're interested in that meeting, making sure that we feel comfortable that at the end of the day, if you want to go to college, you will be going to college. So part of this is showing colleges that you are interested in them. I cannot talk about this enough because this has gained a lot of importance in the last couple of years. Colleges will rank students based on how much the student has engaged with the college. This has become a big factor for admissions at Miami University in Ohio and a lot of other schools. And there is a list in the Google Classroom of some of the top schools that consider demonstrated interest that you are showing them. Taking official campus tours, whether that's in person or online, is one way. Some colleges will track whether or not you open their email, honestly. They will see whether or not you attend the college rep visits. This is a great way for students to interact with colleges. We have over 50 colleges come to Bay High School every year, admission officers, and a lot of times that admission officer is the person who will be reading and evaluating your student's essay or your student's application. So forming that relationship, leaving a positive impression can be very helpful. And even just participating by showing your interest in doing the optional sections or applying early action shows that you're taking that initiative to try to interact as much as you can. So as you're exploring, visiting schools, attending college fairs, those rep visits, networking, all of these are great ways for your student to learn more about colleges. There are some maps in the Google Classroom that's showing where our Bay grads have gone over the last 4 years. If there's a school and your students see interest in the University of Montana, we have grads who go there. We can connect them. So we're happy to help facilitate that. So that's kind of the what are you looking for in a college? I'm going to dive a little bit into now what are colleges looking for in you? This is the big question that parents ask all the time. How much does this matter? How much does this matter versus this? So this is an aggregate chart of 185 colleges, but it is pretty reflective of college answers overall that I have looked at. So this goes into how colleges rank, how important different factors are in the admissions process. So you can see that academics is at the top of the list. Colleges care most about what grades you're getting and in what classes. GPA is not necessarily that because a lot of colleges will unrank GPA because different schools do different things in terms of how they calculate GPA. But if you get an A in this class, reflects pretty the same across the board from school to school. So they're looking at your grades and they're looking at, have you pushed yourself? How strong is your curriculum? So we want to make sure that, especially what part of the reason we're doing this now is that before your students start the spring of their junior year, we want them to understand that the GPA that they finish junior year with is the GPA they will be applying to college with. There are no grades that go in between May of June of your junior year and November 1st of your senior year when you're submitting those college applications. So how you finish, we want you to finish strong. So that is of importance. All right, testing. A lot of students think that the importance of testing is a lot higher than it actually is. So you can see that only about 5% of respondents marked testing as extremely important in the admissions. It's so important, but not as important as students tend to think. Leadership activities is your extracurricular activities, whether or not you work. How do you show yourself to be a leader? And there are a lot of ways that you can do this that you may not think about. When we talk about extracurriculars, a lot of people only think about school sports and school clubs. There are a lot of things that count for the college application. So on the application, students can list up to 10 activities, and they get a very brief amount of time to describe them, but they do ask how long have you been involved in it and which ones are there. So whether babysitting or being really involved in your church or being in a hiking club, I've had students who put, they play guitar at home. There are a lot of things that can count as an extracurricular that students don't always think of. So don't undersell that the value of doing things outside of only school sports and clubs. But getting involved is important. Ideally, I would always want a student to be able to list about no less than 5 activities that they do, whether that's working, things like that. So if you're kind of thinking about your student right now and you're like, they're not really involved in too much, now is a good time to think about that, talk to us. We can help connect them with things. Mrs. Walukas runs Sources of Strength, which is during the school day and open to everybody. It's a great one for kids to get involved in who don't have time after school. And then accolades is your recommendations, interviews, letters of recommendation. Juniors are going to be asking teachers for letters of recommendation by the end of the year. We usually recommend that students ask 2 or 3 teachers, 2, no more than 3. But now is a good time to start thinking about who might I be going to ask? And now you have time between now and May to kind of think about where you stand in that relationship. Is there anything that you want to do between now and May to strengthen that? So it's a good time to start thinking about that. And then spirit is the last kind of section that colleges are looking at. And you can see how high positive character attributes are in here. Colleges want kids who are going to be good roommates. They want kids who are going to be good leaders in the classroom, who are going to be kind, and they are assessing that through their essays, their letters of rec, their activities they're involved in. That's important to a lot of schools. So every college actually publishes their own chart of this and where they rank things. This is something that we look at as counselors, and we help students gauge where to put different attention in their application. Just as a kind of idea, this is Ohio State's chart. They obviously are very high in academics. You can see that they also are very big on leadership, leadership recommendations, your essays. And then they're a school that you can see level of applicants' interest. They do not care about demonstrate interest. They are way too big. They can't track it. So those are things that we will help you with along the way. But this information is out there in terms of how important are these different elements of the application for your student. All right, and before I hand it over to Bill, I just wanted to cover a couple updates in the college application process in Ohio specifically. So in Ohio, this is a new law this year. Students who are in the top 5% qualify for the Governor's Merit Scholarship. that has actually existed for a couple of years. That is worth up to $5,000 per year and it's well for up to 4 years. New this year is that all of those top 5% students and any student in the top 10% now have guaranteed admission to any Ohio public university. So I will say that the state of Ohio defines how many students are in the top 10%. So in the case of a tie, they still allow us to only give names for the number they gave us. There's some criteria in our student handbook about how we break ties, but we as a school still do not report class rank. This is just information that we as counselors will receive on the deadline and send that information out. So I won't necessarily know, we don't know where in that 5 to 10% your student ranks, but we know that they are alphabetic. We did get the list in alphabetical order. So before you come asking, I'll just address that. But we do qualify for the guaranteed admission. Your student still has to meet all the deadlines. At Ohio State, they still have to submit their test scores, and it doesn't guarantee that they get submitted to any particular program. Ohio State has actually also come out with some updates. If you receive a perfect score on your ACT or SAT, you get free tuition, room and board. And then if you're a family that has less than $100,000 of adjusted gross income, you can attend a regional campus for free tuition, room and board. And that follows you if you transition to Columbus campus. So that is a very appealing option for families who are in that income range. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of it. All right, so I am going to hand things over to Mrs. Walukas actually. And I know we're running low on time, so we'll be quick, but I will let her talk about some planning for your future.
So coming up is scheduling, which I know seems crazy, but we are going to be doing scheduling January, February. So I just wanted you guys to be able to sit down with your kids. Mrs. Holden has been working very hard on our course selection guide, which I think it's almost done and will be posted to our website very soon. To get any of this information too, by the way, you just go to the Bay High School website and we have a huge section on the counseling department. I also wanted to mention that's where students can log into their Naviance. And if you want to look at your students' Naviance accounts, you just use their email, their Bay email, and then their password is always 2027 and then their lunch code. So I forgot to mention that earlier. But going through math is obviously very important. Not all colleges count the AP Computer Science credit as a math. We do at Bay High School, but as you look here on the right-hand side, admission officers ranking of math courses. So you could see that's kind of, obviously it's great to take if you want to study computer science or just get that idea or a general idea of what that class is about. Maybe it sparks your interest in a possible major, but for colleges, especially if you're going into business, they do want to see calculus. It doesn't necessarily have to be AP Calc, as you can see here, and regular calculus and AP Calculus are ranked basically the same. So 5% of colleges require incoming students to take Calc, but 18% of college explicitly require calculus for admission to a specific program. I'll use Miami for an example. So Miami is a school that is now requiring AP Economics or just Economics college credit and calculus to be a direct admit into their business school. And next year we are offering AP Economics at Bay High School. So that is a new class that we will be offering next year. So get excited about that. But it definitely a high percentage of colleges reported that calculus gives them, the applicants, an edge in the admissions process. So 94% of colleges agreed the statistic provides definitely a valuable preparation, but it's not as high up as, so a lot of kids will be like, my senior year, I'm just going to do AP stats and not do calc. Definitely, I would probably choose calculus. We're seeing that more colleges are wanting students to do calculus. And then there's a couple things under there about Notre Dame and Penn State that we can consider, but obviously STEM, architecture, business majors. Indeed, we do have a 4-year math requirement, but they would recommend students, not recommending students to substitute the statistics for calculus. So for senior year, courses to consider, depending on, like, let's say your student wants to study law or engineering and business. So obviously business, engineering, and health sciences are heavy in the calculus science areas, and then law. We have some great courses listed here. This is just, obviously this presentation is going to be available to everybody, and we're going to go through this with all of our kiddos when we start doing our scheduling meetings. But I think it's good. These are 5 really popular majors that our kids go into to kind of see which classes they should select for their senior year. And then timeline, scheduling's coming up. Like I said, January, February. The big test, which Mrs. Fanter discussed, is going to be March 11th, the SAT. But again, get your kids signed up for the ACT in either December or February. Career interests, we talked a lot about the shadowing career experience-ship. It's a huge way for a kid to kind of find out if that is the type of major they want to study when they go to college, if they actually get in with somebody, if they spend the day with a lawyer, if they spend the day with a nurse, if they spend the day at KeyBank working with an investment banker. And all of these things obviously are compiled by taking those Naviance career assessment tests. And again, start doing your college research now for sure. At the end of the year, we want all our juniors to be asking teachers at least 2, possibly 3. So a lot of schools do require a counselor recommendation as well. So we will do that for your student. Creating that college list is huge. A lot of our kids are already doing college visits, which is amazing. But in the spring is when a lot of colleges kind of roll out the red carpet for juniors. They have junior days. We really want our kids to get on campus and visit schools and come up with a list so they know where they want to apply senior year when we start doing the one-on-one meetings with seniors and their parents. And athletes, if you want to play sports in college, you definitely need to create an account with the NCAA Eligibility Center. So make sure that you do that. And if you need any help with that, please talk to your counselor. And then obviously, again, testing, retaking those tests to getting the best score that you possibly can. And then in the fall, we'll start doing our senior conferences right when you guys get back to school. So we'll be sending out links for you guys to sign up for those meetings. But starting August 1st, you can start filling out the Common App. And I would definitely highly recommend that you don't submit college apps till you have your senior conference. So, and just making sure that you know when deadlines are and things like that. But we encourage kids to apply as soon as possible. So again, scheduling that senior conference for your child at the beginning of the school year, it's going to be great. We're going to go over all of this again and kind of more obviously tailored to your child. But getting the applications done early and getting things submitted is it's a huge weight off your shoulders, and it's great. So paying attention to deadlines, knowing where you want to apply, and just having like that general idea of what you want to study is very useful. So now I'm going to pass it off to Mr. Novak.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank Megan, Carrie, and Heather for the opportunity to be part of the panel. And it's great working at Bay with all of you, and certainly all the staff at Bay as well. So thank you. We're going to talk a little bit about what financial aid is. Certainly, the parents have heard about it. It's expenses, paying for the expenses for college, community college. Megan mentioned trade school expenses. Just briefly, I want to cover that. In Ohio, there's something called technical centers, Ohio Technical Centers on the adult ed side. There's 49 such centers throughout the state of Ohio. The closest ones to Bay would be Polaris in Middleburg, Lorain County JVS, and then Cuyahoga Valley Career Center out in Brecksville. They have adult programming, and they typically have 10 to 14 different programs that lead to licensure or certification. That's typically what we're talking about, trade school for adults. As Megan mentioned before, the West Shore Voc District covers, and Lakewood covers the Bay students while they're in high school. But the different sources of financial aid, certainly the federal government, state government, the colleges or universities, and then private sources, either on a national level or a local level. Loans are definitely considered part of financial aid. Okay, to-do list, basically the important things, some of these things have been mentioned, but the visit schools, the 4-year, 2-year, Ohio Technical Centers, there are a lot of students, and again, you don't track, basically the technical centers don't track where they're from, but as we know nationally in the state of Ohio, there are a lot of students that drop out of college, and a lot of them do end up at the Ohio Technical Centers. These programs that they have are typically 1 year or less. There's very few that are beyond that, but all have visit options available. The other thing that I think is really critical, and Megan mentioned this in her part of the presentation, is the fit. I really encourage the students and the parents, more of the students, to visit the Career Center and see what they have in the way of internships while they're in school, the job placement assistance they're going to get when they graduate, and what's their level of employer engagement during the time that the student's at school. The colleges have been very, very responsive to this in the last 10 to 12 years because what the employers are telling them, we want students that have work-based learning experiences. We want students that have that experiential learning background. So the colleges have responded to this. So I would encourage the students to do it for that reason, but also to try to connect a little bit more what their major is going to lead them to in the end. The other thing that Megan mentioned that's critical is the college cost. And what I tell the students and the families is the same, both sides. It doesn't have to be the most important factor, but it can't be anything less than equal to any other factor. The cost of colleges is getting way out of hand right now to not factor that in. So what I encourage the students to do is sit down with your mom and dad, sit down with your counselors, sit down with your teachers, ask them questions about the loan payments, that kind of thing, more your parents with that. But they all have loan repayment calculators, and you can figure out how much it's going to cost over the time you're in college, and then look back on that and say, does this make sense for me to do this? So I think that's really critical. The net price calculators, every college has this. If you just put net price calculator Miami, net price calculator Baldwin Wallace, you'll come up to that page, and it's going to simulate what kind of aid you're going to get from that college based on questions that they're going to ask you. It's all pretty much confidential or anonymous. You don't have to put your name down. Some of them will ask for it, but you don't have to do it. The other thing that's very useful is a student aid estimator on the federal student aid side. That will give you a better idea of what kind of Pell Grant eligibility you're going to have, and a little bit more what type of maybe loan help you're going to get from the federal side. They're not going to get into the states, but just on the federal side. The most you can get on the federal loan, or excuse me, the federal Pell Grant right now is $7,395 as a grant. That's need-based. They're going to look at the income and the assets of the family as well as a student. And then the other thing that's going to be on the estimator is what type of loans you're eligible for on the Fed side. And again, that's based on the student. The most you can get is $5,500 as a freshman on the federal student loans. Some of that's going to be based on need. Some of it won't be based on need, but that's the most you can get. And again, what can you afford to pay? Again, work backwards. Look at the loans you're going to take out for the 4 or 5 years you're going to be at school. Look at the repayment calculators and sit down with your mom and dad, sit down with the counselors, the teachers, and say, does this make sense for me when I get out of school? The other thing that I think is really critical is a scholarship search can actually start now. There's not going to be a lot that's open as junior year, but there are some that are open as juniors, and you can apply for scholarships without having applying to a school. But most will open in senior year. But I would have them take a look at that. And all the major scholarship searches are going to have filters that you can use for intended majors, your specialties, your ethnicities, your backgrounds, that kind of thing. So I think that makes sense to start looking at that now on a national basis. Types of financial aid. And we covered this, certainly free money is the most important. The gift aid, federal and state grants. There's different grants that Ohio has. One of the most common ones is Choose Ohio First, which is a STEM-based grant. Each school has a contact person for that, the colleges, and they have a central page. If you put Ohio Higher Ed grants and scholarships, you'll come up with that page. And then certainly scholarships, the bulk of that's going to come from the college or the university. Most schools by far, if you apply to the school, you have an open application for all the scholarships that school has. There may be some specific schools, whether it's a school of engineering, a school of nursing, that may require an additional application for that. But just check the page, check the financial aid page. You'll be pretty clear about that. Self-help aid obviously must be repaid or earned. Loans, as I mentioned before, the most you can get as a freshman is $5,500 for a federal loan. Work Study is a need-based program. It's a federal program that allows the students to work. Typically, it's $2,000 to $3,000. The income goes directly to the student, so it's not an offset for tuition. It'll go to the student, but it is a need-based program, and that's through the FAFSA. The financial aid process, pretty simple, straightforward. Every student's going to need what's called an FSA, a Federal Student Aid ID, to access the FAFSA. The ID application takes about 2.5 to 3 minutes. It's not very involved. At least one of the parents, maybe two, as termed as contributors, will also need an ID to access their part of the FAFSA. The best way to do this is, I think, the student initiates the FAFSA, and we'll cover this more in detail at the financial aid meetings when the students are seniors, but the students can initiate the process. They invite the parents through email, and then the parent does their part. The FAFSA has really been simplified over the last 3 years for the parents who have done this in the past with maybe older siblings of your current son or daughter. The process now is very, very condensed. It takes literally 15 to 20 minutes max to do the FAFSA for the parents. The students are telling me they're doing it in 10 to 12 minutes, their part. So it's very much condensed compared to what it was. The FAFSA is open on October 1st of every year. Last year it was delayed, but this year, October 1st, and that'll be the date going forward as well. Some schools have what's called a CSS profile. There's about 300 schools in the nation that have that, and there's 6 in Ohio that have it. Case, Denison, Worcester, Kenyon, Oberlin, and I think Cleveland Institute of Music. The CSS profile is much more involved, much more extensive than the FAFSA. They're going to ask much more detailed questions about your financial income and assets. But typically, those schools have a much larger endowment and the ability to have more grant and scholarship aid. So if you do have a CSS school, it's a whole separate process, but you have to do both. You have to do the FAFSA and the CSS, and only if the CSS is required by a school. And it'll be clearly marked as such on the financial aid page website of the school. Okay, scholarships. We talked a little bit about scholarships. The institutional, they're going to have merit and need-based. When the student applies to a college, they're going to look at the application. They'll look at the grades. They'll look at the test scores if they're submitted, and then they may come up with a merit-based scholarship. They'll also look at the need-based scholarships. They'll base that on the FAFSA, which will be in the financial aid offer letter, which typically come out late January, February for most schools. And they'll have a pretty detailed indication of what you're going to pay based on what the net cost of the school is. They're going to deduct what's called your student aid index, which used to be called the expected family contribution, the EFC. And then they're going to list all the aids and grants and loans that you're eligible for. So again, check the websites to make sure that you don't have to apply for scholarships separately by a specific school or institution within the college. I'm going to jump to the nationals, and I'm going to go back to the locals. The nationals, we have another extensive page for the national scholarships. I would definitely look at the nationals, and again, you can filter a lot of these scholarship searches out by intended majors, specialties that the students have, their interests, their skills, their abilities, their ethnicity. There's a lot of filters you can use to help you sort that out. The locals, I always encourage the students to apply for the locals. And for this year's juniors, they'll be out ready to go next year, but take a look at that. And late November is typically when Bay opens it up. They're listed on there, but they're not open yet, right? Carrie and Megan, they're not open yet till late November. I added LEAF here only because we have some scholarships that only are eligible to Cuyahoga County residents. So we're going to have some scholarships on there that are just for Cuyahoga County, and I would encourage the students to take a quick look at that too as well. Okay, next one. Here's the scholarship search websites. These are common. These are the big ones. There's going to be a lot of commonality within these specific websites, so you might see the same kind of thing. The other thing you could do a Google search as well for specific scholarships in majors. You might come up with it different. And I also encourage the students to look at the professional organizations that their intended major is going to be. For example, mechanical engineering. There's several engineering sites, and actually there's a certain site that has just for women in engineering that has their own scholarship applications for that. So I encourage the students to take a look at that, and I try to give them those resources as well when I follow up with an email. Thanks, Megan. Next one. Okay, thank you again. I appreciate working with everyone at Bay, and certainly the students and the parents, and whatever I can do to help you become successful through your journey after Bay for post-secondary help, just let me know. Thank you.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have questions after tonight, I don't think there were any questions in the Q&A that I saw, but please feel free to email me, email Carrie. If you have questions, further questions about financial aid, or you'd like to schedule a one-on-one meeting with Bill, you can do so by contacting our counseling office or by emailing Bill directly. But we are very thankful again that you joined us, and we hope that you have more information about the process going forward. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Gary.